Hello, welcome back. I have a video loaded on the VLE which shows you a brief description of how to get Bootstrap running on your project. This lecture is not meant to teach you Bootstrap, and the video already uploaded is also does not go into details how to use Bootstrap. Because we've started with HTML and CSS, I thought it wise to include, give you a brief of Bootstrap, how you can use it, and call the classes of Bootstrap, and so on and so forth, and use it in your project. It helps beautify your projects as it helps you also, complete your projects in the fastest speed, especially when it comes to the styling of your page. Now, um, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a CRUD application, which is going to include a registration form, or more like a sign up form, a login page. The sign up is just the same as the registration form, and the view info will give you the information that we put into the database. So on the home page, this is how it's going to look. We have the chance to sign up by registering with your full name, your username, your email, and the password. We're going to go through this, and I hope to finish this in an hour. Now, I'll be pausing the video at and when, just to get things organized as quickly as possible. So let's start. Now, in the process of coming out with a dynamic website, we're using PHP to help us process the information that we get from the users and also put into the database. The processing process, and it means we need to have a database that will hold the information that we're going to take from the users. The database that we're using is MySQL. I believe most of you now have an idea how to create a database in MySQL, and also how to create tables and entities or attributes in MySQL. I'm going to go through this briefly and quickly. So I'll first of all start with the creation of a username and a password that would have access to the MySQL database. You should be mindful that by default, when you have XAMPP or WAMP or AMP installed, you already have your root your username as root and the password as nothing, empty. So um, those that use AMPs too is the same. In fact, it runs through all. Anytime you install MySQL, it comes with a default username root and a password of nothing. I am going to create a username and also create a password for it, because most times when you go online and you publish your website online, you always would have to have a username that will talk to a database. Of course, a username and a password. So when I go to PHP my admin for the first start, I go to localhost PHP my admin. Those that are using XAMPP, you first of all would have to make sure your XAMPP server is running. In that, Apache will be running and MySQL will be running. So you see something that looks similar to what you see on the screen. So from there, the next thing you have to do is to go to users. This step is not so necessary. You can just forget about it, but I just want to create it because I intend to, do certain things with it, but it's not so necessary. As I said, MySQL comes with the default username, root, and no password. So I'm going to create a new user, and the user I'm going to call it. I'll come here and click on add user. So I'll probably create a user called maybe RT. Sorry, RT for so root. Let's say I'll call it, let's say CRUD root. CRUD RT, which is CRUD root. And the host name I'm going to use what we call the local host. The password I'm just going to use maybe, let's say heaven, all small letters. I can also choose to generate a password, but I just want to be able to remember this. So the next thing I'm going to do is to check all these. I want to give um, full access to the database to this particular user, so that he'll be able to see all the tables, all the databases that are in my SQL database. So I'll select the data structure and so on and so forth by giving it full access, which is global privilege to all the tables and databases that are available. Right after that, I'll just say go. I'll click on go so I can save this one. It's not mandatory. So now I've been able to create a table. So we have in here, I have a user called CRUD which is on working on the local host. So when I go to the users again, I should be able to see CRUD, and I have full access to this. So I can log out of this and go to this. From here, I can log out from my MySQL database. When I do that, I'm timed out. So I'll try and log into it. So the user was CRUD -RT and the password was heaven. Please, this step is very crucial. I would want you to be very careful if you want to create a username for your database. If you mess it up, you might not be able to use a MySQL PHP MyAdmin. So I advise you take your time and go through it very well. If possible, don't even attempt it if you can't do it. In fact, I would advise you don't attempt it unless you become very conversant with the use of PHP MyAdmin. All right, so I've been able to log on to my database. And the next thing I will want to do is I will want to create a database called CRUD. So I'll come to databases and create a database called CRUD or CRUD, whichever one. And I'll say create, and within it, so now I have my CRUD database created. I'll wait when I'll come back again, and within this, I'm probably going to create a table called sign up. So maybe sign up like this. Better still, sign or register, a register table. So I will save this one. And from here, if you look at this one, I have full name, username, user email, and password. So I would, first of all, hold on. I'll come back again to this site when I finish setting up my page. So I'll come again to create the table once again. So now let me go back again to my folder. If you recall, I was saying that because PHP is a server-side scripting, all your files need to reside on the server. So what I would want us to do is to make sure those that are using AMPs, you go through the right path drive, see AMPs www folder. Those that are using XAMPP, all your files should be within the htdocs folder. I am using AMPs, that's why I'm going through this route. So within this folder, within my SQL folder, within the drive C, I have a folder called AMPs and I have a folder called www, and that contains a folder called CRUD. So all my application that I'm going to develop here is going to reside in here. Make sure your application is not found on drive C or on the desktop. Make sure it is within the server where the files of the website needs to reside. I'm repeating again, for AMPs, it has to be inside the www folder. For XAMPP, it has to be into the htdocs folder. So I have created a folder called CRUD, and it's empty here. So all my files will have to reside in here. So I'll go back again to my Visual Studio Code. Then this time around, inside the VS Code, you can see I'll go to File, I'll go to Open Folder. Then inside Open Folder, I'll open the CRUD folder. That is where I'm going to have all my files all my files actually are going to reside in here. So I'll select that folder. If there is any pop-up for you to update, it's the same thing. Make sure you trust the location that is in there. So I'm going to have all my files in here. You recall in previous lectures for HTML and CSS, I had a way of structuring my folders. So it's the same way that I'm going to do here. So bear with me and let me start the creation of these folders. Okay, because I always want my files to be organized, I'm going to begin by creating a folder called CSS. That is where all my CSS file will reside. I'm going to create another folder called image or IMG. That will hold all the images that I intend to put in here. I'll create another folder called include, and include would include any PHP files or JavaScript or any other thing that I think is necessary for my work. I'll create a folder called include. Then the last one, which is going to be JS, that is going to hold my JavaScript. So that is how I intend going through this. In fact, the JS would include my JavaScript, Bootstrap JavaScript that I probably might want to include in my work. Now, so with this done from the website, from here, you can see that I have from this website, sorry, just a minute. From here, you can see I have a big blue line over here where I have these menus, home, log in, sign up, and so on and so forth. And I've already told you that because we don't want to list the directory of our folder, it's always appropriate to have an index.php or HTML file inside your folder, which is on the web server. So those of us, let me just be now. Now, this is what we intend doing. To be able to navigate to our website, we go through it through localhost and we use CRUD. And inside that, we have a list of the folders that I have created inside my VS Code, which is now inside my CRUD folder in the www folder. So localhost now stands for drive C, arms, drive C forward slash arms forward slash www forward slash www. So that's the entire localhost. And within it, I have a folder called CRUD. And that is exactly the same as what you see in here. If I bring it up again, if you come in here, you can see all these is the same thing that I have in here. These are the creation that I made earlier on. Please, this is very important and make sure you don't mess up. Don't put your files in your documents or desktop. It will never work. It's a server-side scripting. So your file should always be on the server. Please, this is very important. Make sure your files are always in the right directory of the server that you install. XAMPP, WAMP, AMP, LAMP, MAMP, whichever one that you use, make sure you go through it using the right method. So please, and please again, make sure you go through it. Use the right link to upload a folder into of your web application. Now, with this done, of course, I wouldn't want to list the directory in here. So as you already know, to be able to do that, we will have to now make sure we okay, because I don't want to have a directory listing of the content in my web application. In the VS Code, I've created what we call the index.html file that will stop the listing of the directory. The directories and also the files that reside inside it. I already have my Bootstrap file in here in my CSS. You can, when you download it, you can put it in here. I have some few images in here. I have the include folder that contains nothing yet, and I have the Bootstrap JavaScript that I can incorporate in here. Of course, Bootstrap usually comes with CSS and also JavaScript. So you can call on it CSS and also it JavaScript. For the CSS, you can call on the classes, the IDs that are available and also use in your project. Okay, now that I have all my files in the right locations, so for CSS, for instance, it contains the Bootstrap. For the images, I have these two files. For the JavaScript, I have the Bootstrap JS. Bootstrap JS and Bootstrap.css all comes as a package when you download the version or the latest version of Bootstrap on the Bootstrap website. My concentration is not on Bootstrap per se, but those that would want to make sure their website looks very appealing, I would advise you go through the first video that I've put up there, giving you a brief description of how to incorporate Bootstrap in your work. For this purposes, for the purposes of this, I'm not going to go through Bootstrap. The version of Bootstrap that I'm using is 4.3. Currently, there is a latest version of Bootstrap which is 5.3. Most of the things that you see here also will be found in a Bootstrap 5. So I would want you to go through the Bootstrap 5 or 4.3 and use it in your projects. Now, just to prevent directory listing on my server, I've included the index.html, which I'm going to put in some Bootstrap content in here. So all these information, I'll briefly go through it. So you will appreciate, I will probably have a brief understanding of what I want to do. This forms the basis for the styling for my website. My concentration is being able to pick up information from the user, put that information into a database, retrieve that information, update the information, and probably delete it whenever is necessary. So I'm not going to go through this. I have some comments in here. Of course, I'm going to provide you with all the content that you see in here. I'll put it on the VLE. The first video is already on the VLE. Please make sure you watch it. The PDF for the entire lecture is also on the VLE. Make sure you go through it. So quickly, I'm going to just have a brief explanation of how the code looks like. Now, you know how to come out with the skeleton for HTML. You start by typing HTML:5 and it displays the information for you. So for the head, the title always resides in the head. So I have the title being termed as CRUD registration page. Then within it, of course, the meta name, whoever is, working or came out with this code, that's me. As you can see, me, the viewports, all these things, I think I'm not really going to hit it. Now, my concentration over here, how do we import or integrate Bootstrap in our page? And by doing so, we would have to now call on the link elements or tag in the HTML elements, as you already know. So we call the link elements, and its relation is the style sheet, and of course the location of the Bootstrap file is what we see in here inside the CSS and Bootstrap. Then of course I also have what we call another link called icon. Icon is mainly for the icons that we see at the header of our pages. So if you come here, these are what we called fave icons or icons. These, let me go back again on the page. These are what we call icons. So this is PHP MyAdmin icon or fave icon, W3 School fave icon, Bootstrap fave icon, maybe UMAT fave icon, and so on and so forth. So now, when I refresh the page, this is what I'm seeing. As I said, my concentration is not the beautification of the page, but how to take information from the user, input those information, and send them into the database. So that is what this page is really about, the index.html. Now over here, you can see we have other links in here: home, login, sign up, view info, and so on and so forth. This is where my concentration lies. And that is what I want us to talk about. So I'm still going to explain the code in here so you understand. Of course, I'm using a body class of BJ Light, which is also found in the Bootstrap. So you see virtually all these things. The first video tells you how to get a very nice Bootstrap and integrate it in your work. Now, when you're done, this is where my concentration is, the form elements that you see in here. You can see I have the form action, and the action says when I click on the submit button, this particular script, which is index.insert.php, should be triggered to pick the information that the user has inputted or put in the folder, in the text box that is allocated in the browser over here. So the information that the user is being required to input is the full name, the username, the email address, and the password. We have a button in there that says submit. So those are the information that is being required by the user to input. So this is where my concentration is. You are not mandated to use Bootstrap. You can use a regular CSS to complete this. But for this, I just want you to have an idea how it works. The last time I remember telling you to find the difference between the post method and the get method whenever we call on this attribute in the form element or form tag. You should know when you use the post method and when we use the get method. Hitting on this again. Know the reason for using the post method and also the get method. So once you've been able to, this I believe all of you should be able to create it. This I'm very certain all of you have an idea how to create it. So now we're done with the first page. You don't necessarily have to use the Bootstrap one. You can still use the normal CSS and use it to create a page that looks very similar to what you see in here. You can use tables and so on and so forth. And that would also work. Now you can also see from here, I have some placeholders in here. I have the required attributes attached to each of the input types, making it mandatory for the user to input some details in there before the information goes into the database. So this is for my index.html page. So the first thing that we have to create is the insert.php. The insert.php is going to take up the content of the information that the user gives us so we can send it into the database. So we'll begin by creating that one, which is the insert.php. So I begin by creating the insert.php file. So I'll go here, click on new, and create insert.php file. There are other files that I will need to include, like edit, update, delete, and so on and so forth. All these files, of course, will be talking to the database. So before I create all these, it will be very necessary to create a file possibly called connection. That we can call on later on in each of these files, the insert, the view, the create, edit, delete, and so on and so forth, without having to create them one by one in each of these files. So that is where I have the include folder in here. So inside the include folder, first of all, select the include folder. Then inside it, I'll come to new file. And within it, I will create a file called connection. So I have new, and I'll create a file called connection.php. So this is going to hold a PHP script that is going to help us connect to the MySQL database. So inside the connection, the connection.php file is going to hold the connection string that will help us have access to the database with our PHP script. So I'll begin in connecting to the database. First of all, we'll have to start with, as I said, PHP is a server-side scripting. So we'll begin by typing PHP. This is the normal skeleton that we normally use with our PHP. So inside there, we'll declare a variable called con or connection. And this variable is going to hold a function called MySQL I, which is the improved version of MySQL, so connect. So this function is very necessary. MySQL I connect, and this contains a minimum of for the normal regular one, we use 3 arguments. But this time around, with the SQLi, which is the improved version of MySQL, we can have 4 arguments. The first argument is going to hold the server name, which is localhost. Then the next one is going to hold the username of the username that we created. I think it's CRUD RT. You remember I created a username called CRUD RT. You created your own, might be root. The username might be root. And the next one is the password. Your password, if by default MySQL comes with a username root with no password. But I created a password called, I think, heaven. So I'm going to use heaven as my password. And the last one is going to be, is going to hold the database name, which I called CRUD. And of course, every PHP declaration that you make always have to end with a semicolon. Please, this is very important. If not, you'll be getting lots of errors. I remember I created a username called my SQL username called RT and a password called heaven, and this is the name of the database. So my SQLi connect function or method takes in four arguments: the server name, the username of the database, the password of the database, and the name of the database. So these are very important. So from here, we would want to see if indeed the connection that we have established to the database is working or not. So we can begin by, querying it by finding out if this connection is true. So if it is not true, that is the variable that we've created. So if the connection, if this statement is not true, if there is no connection, what do we do? We want to spew out an information telling the database or telling us that we're unable to connect your database. So if not there is no connection, we'll have the dial function holding up this information, maybe connection error, and possibly sometimes if we want to have more details about the error, we can by just type MySQLi error, and that is a function that will help us to know if there are other errors to tell us exactly what the error was when we try connecting to the database. So I'll save this one and um, let me be very sure. Let me go into the database to see if my connection was actually right. So let me go back again to the PHP my admin. I created a user called CrudRT. The user was called CrudRT. Yes, so it's correct. So CrudRT, I think so. It's right. And I'm sure the password I've used was heaven, which I believe is also correct. So I'll go back again to the VS Code. So this is the connection string that will help us connect to the database. So anytime we want to talk to the database from all the scripts, PHP script that we will create, we have to call on this connection string and use it to connect to our database. So we will end here for the connection and now begin by creating our insertion, which is being called on by our index.html over here. There's the form. The form action over here is calling on the insert.php. So it's this insert.php that's going to hold the scripts that will go into, that will take the information from our table to our database. So it's very necessary we continue with that particular script, the creation of the scripts to send the information from the insert.html to the database. So we begin by starting with our normal PHP skeleton. So we start with PHP. And as you already know, that's how we start creating PHP scripts. So now, as I said, if we were to, we can create this connection and input it in each of our files one by one. It's just a repetition, just like how we created an external style sheet. So it is best to create a connection somewhere and call on it when we need it. So because this insert.php is going to connect to the database, we'll begin by calling on the connection to the database. And that is what we use a function called required. We can use required or required ones. So required ones is going to take up this information. And what is it going to require? The connection.php file. And where is the connection.php file? It is located inside the include folder. So And because the insert.php is on the same level as the include, we begin by typing include / connection. Then we would terminate with a semicolon, as you already know. So now we've been able to include our connection string in our insert.php file. Previous, if we were to go the normal way, we would have written the entire thing we have in the connection over here without having to call this particular file. We have to write it all over again. It's best to always include it. Now, there is one thing that we also want to check. From our connection, from our index.html, you remember we have a button of name submit. So this is very key. The names that we give each of our files is very important. So you can see from here, we have that for the email, the text, and so on and so on, the password, and so on and so forth. They are really important when we are coming out with the names that we have in here are very important. So this is what we are going to be calling and also sending to the database. So it's very important we pay attention to the name that we give for our input types that we create. This is very, very important. So please be careful about them. Now for our submit, we want to find out if when we use the post method, we were able to set something we call the submit. We have a post method that holds a name called submit, which we have in here. So that is one thing that we'll have to also look out for. So we begin by typing if is set. So if it's set, if a set is going to make sure is going to find out if we have a variable name called submit that has been set in our form. So in calling that particular variable, we always begin with a $ and underscore post. So post is the method that we use in our previous in our HTML form. Remember, I asked, so for the post method, it takes the syntax where we have the square brackets, and now we will select the submit. So the submit is the name of the post that we have in our form. So this is very important. Let me go by here. When you come in here, the form action is using the method post. So we're using post in here. If you had used get, you could have also used get. And most times we use post, and I've already told you to find the difference between the post and the get. So for the insertion, we would now try to find out if is set, if submit post, if the post function was created with the submit name, if there is indeed the post method that holds, a button called submit. If that is set, then there are a few things that we would want to do. So if it's set, post submit, then we'll begin our curly braces and start and also find out if all our form elements that we have in there have been given, they have information in there. So we are also going, by the way, in our HTML file, what we did was we tried to check to see, we put a required function to force the user to now input information in there. But in situations where we didn't require the user, we can also use PHP to also force them to fill out any blank fields that they didn't complete. You can also do that using PHP. But if you want, PHP is a server-side scripting. So when it's going through the process, it will check to see if the user filled a form, a part of the form, like let's say the email or the password. If it didn't fill, then he will tell you, please fill in the blank fields or the text fields that are available. But mind you, we've used the client-side scripting, which is the HTML part, to force the user to enter some username, to enter the fields, some values in the fields that we require. The full name, the email, password, and so on and so forth. So this particular portion we can omit it. But most times we always include it. So we also want to find out if empty, and these are a few things that we want to check. So we'll use the post. So the first one that we want to find out is, do we have is the full name, sorry, is the full name um, text field, is it empty? That is one thing that we are trying to find out. So that's full name. This particular full name, please, is the same as what we have in here. Over here, as you see, this full name. The name here is very important. This full name is what we are using. The names that we give each of the inputs elements is what we are calling on them, not any other thing. So please be careful and make sure you use the right names in when you are using the post method. Over here, we use the post submit. We're trying to find out if the submit was set. So please don't be using different things and so on, like this username and so on, user email and so on. But rather is the names that we have for each of the text element that is necessary. So please make sure you call on the right names. If not, you'll be getting errors. So I'll go back again. Then I'll continue with the scripts that I have in here. So the first one, which we already have. So if full name is empty, let's try to see if there are other ones that might also be empty. Or we can also see and find out if maybe the username is also empty. I can, for now, let me just copy and paste this so that I can be quick with this information. All right, so I have this one. Then I want to just make sure that everything that we're doing is we're doing it right. Just a minute. So whenever any of these is true, we will want the user to fill out some information. So the last one, these are the names that we're looking at for. So we have the first one is the full name. The second one is the username. So that's the username. That's the name we have already given. The next one is, let me see. So we have full name, username. We have the next one, which is email, and the last one, which is our password. So these are names of what we have in there. And of course, we don't have any additional ones, so we can close. All right, so we've been able to have all the necessary ones that we need. So once we first of all check to see if submit is set, and we also within it we try to see if any of the names that name field that we were asking the user to fill is empty. If any of them is empty, then there is something that we want. We want if any of them is empty, then we would want the user to do some few other things. Let me just. So the last one is the password. So we are trying to see if any of them is empty. Let me do it this way so it becomes easier. Yes, and look more organized. All right, so if this is empty, this field is empty, this is empty, or this is empty, or this is empty, or this is empty, Then what we want to do is to echo some kind of information to the user that they should please fill in the blank fields. And of course, as I already said, this is a server-side scripting way of checking if the user has filled every information. At the client side, we've already done by using the required attributes in the text element, in the input element for text for each of them. So we don't need to really do this, but sometimes it's important to do this so that we don't miss any other thing. So we'll first of all check to see if the post submit is set. If it is set, then we will try to see if any of the fields is empty. If any of them is empty, then it should tell the user that to fill in any of the blank fields or spaces. If none of them is empty, then that is when we come to the else statements, which we will state as that they should this time round we are creating a variable to hold the content that we have in here and put into our database. So first of all, we'll create a variable called maybe full name, and that full name is going to hold the contents of the post full name, that content that we have in here. The full name is what is displayed is the name for the text, the input text that we have in our HTML page. Full name. So we create another one called maybe username or username, and be mindful that PHP is case sensitive, so we have to be careful what we do so that we don't miss any other things. So post. Then we'll have our username, which we have given. We end each of the PHP line with semicolon. So the email, which we call, which is also going to use the post method, so underscore post, and we call it as email. That is what is in there. So this time around, this. Now, the next one is, of course, we are creating a variable called password. And of course, it's going to pick up the form contents, the post form content that we have for password. Okay. So I believe from here you understand. So first of all, we included a required to be able to pick up the connection string. We included an if set to check if submit is set. And we also try to find out if the fields that we are taking from the user, all of them have been filled. If any of them is not filled, then we tell the user to fill the blank fields. If they have been filled, all of them have been filled, then we are creating new variables to hold these ones, these form values that is coming from the user, and all these things, all these names are coming from the names that we've given inside over here from our HTML document. So these are the names that we call them. So once we've been able to create this, there are some few other things that we need to do. So now we've created some form elements to hold the information. So we have some variables holding all these information from for us. This is what we now will be using to talk to the database. And of course, once we are done creating our variables to hold the form elements, there is something that we also need to do. We're now going to find a way to query our database. So before I even talk about the querying the database, there is this picture that I want to use to illustrate some few things to us. And these are the SQL commands that I would want you to have an idea of. So to insert to insert data into our table, into our SQL database, we use what we call insert into table. So column one, column two, and the values that you are going to pick up. So we have to first of all, we're already connected to the database. We are inserting into a table called maybe sign up, which we have not created. We're going to create it. The first column is going to be the first element or attributes, second attributes, and the values. And the values that we are sending into the database are the ones that we picked from the user, which we have created over here with these elements. And these are what we are picking from the username, from the user. These information are what we are picking from the user. We've created variables to hold them. So that is what we will send into our database. So this is how we insert tables into data into our tables in our database. All right, so quickly, I would want us to go to PHP MyAdmin and create our table. We've already created our database. We will create our table. So we'll go back again to our PHP MyAdmin. Then we created our database called CRUD. And in there, we don't have any tables. Databases contains tables, and within the tables, we have entities and so on and so forth. So now I would want us to create this. I know you know how to do. I want us to create a table inside our CRUD database called sign up. So the sign up that we are creating is going to hold, let's say, maybe 5 fields. So after that, we just press enter to create these names. These I know you have done in databases and you have an idea how to create this. Because you can have used create table, so and so, and the values that you're going to, the attributes that you are going to assign to it. So first of all, I'm going to create the first attribute called, let me bring out, all right, so this is my browser. We've already created our CRUD database, and we are creating our table. The table that I want us to create is called sign up. And the number of columns that I want us to use is 5, as I've said. And it brings out this information. And the first information that I want us to use is to create one for user ID. So we can use user ID. Because we want it to be auto-incremental, we'll maintain the int. And we'll have another one called username to hold our usernames. But it could be any name. So we can have username. Or better, so let's start with the full name. We have our full name, full underscore name. The type is going to be a varchar of a maximum length of 100. But I know you have an idea of all these, so I'm just going through quickly. So we have a username. It's also going to be a varchar. Excuse me. Then we'll have our email address. So that is our email. That is also going to be a varchar. And we'll call it we have The maximum, let's say 100. The last one, password. It will also be a backup. Also 100. So we have this, but because we want our the first one to be auto incremental, so we maintain this, and this, of course, it will be set as the primary key. It automatically increments by itself. So we save this. So we have been able to create our sign up table, and these are the information that we have in our sign up table. Those are the attributes within our sign up table. When we go to browse, we don't have any record in there, so we don't have any information for the sign up table. So now that we've been able to create our sign up form, and this is the structure, we have all these attributes in there. These names are very key when we are calling it in our database, especially for the columns that I showed you in the browser. So these names, as I mean, these names are so key when we're calling it in our PHP scripts. So we should be able to call it correctly. These are the columns that I specified earlier on. So very important, excuse me. Okay, so we have a variables holding each of the form elements being picked from the user in our browser. So the next thing that we have to do is to come out with a query to insert data into our table, or to insert the information that the user inputted or put in their field into the database. And this is the query that we're going to create. We're going to insert into table. The columns are the ones I showed you, the username and the user ID and so on and so forth. Those are the ones that we want to target. We give it the values. Right, so this is the query that we're going to use for this purpose. So I'll go back again to the insert.php. Then I'll create a variable called query. And this query variable is going to hold the SQL insert string query. So we'll put it in quotes. So we have it. So we'll say insert into the name of the table, which is called sign up. And ideally, because user ID is auto incremental, we are not going to we have to now call the respective fields or attribute that we want to insert into. Let me go back again to the browser so you understand what I mean. This is auto incremental, so we don't need to insert values to it. Automatically, it will increase the value and generate these records one by one for us. So we don't need to put values in here. All right, let me go back again. If we were to put values in there, then what we could have done was just said insert into sign up, then we start giving out the values. But because we want to target respective respective attributes or columns, we have to now call each of the columns that we want to update or insert information into. So start with the query, insert into sign up. Then we'll begin with the columns. Mind you, from here, this is how we write it. So insert into the table name, and the columns before the values. So I'll go back again. So insert into sign up. So what I'm going to put in is the full name. The full name is the exact name as what I have in my database. Username, email, and the last one, which is password. And password. So these names are the exact names that we have in the table structure for our database, for our table in the database. So please, this is very key. You don't miss it. And password. Then the values that we want to put in here. So the values are what we have. Values. So VAL values. What do we want to put in there? So we'll begin now by calling the variables that we have created. So the variables that we created are, the first one is, I'm using a single colon because I don't want to truncate this string that I'm creating. That's why I'm using a single colon. If not, I would have used a dot operator, which I showed you in class. So I'll start by typing in the variable name, which is full name. These are the values we have in here. These are the ones I'm calling. Another person could have also not created variables, but called these the entire values directly. If you could have used dollar post, whatever for each of them. And that is also another way of doing it. But I want us to create a variable for each of them to make it easier. So full name. Please, the order we have here is very important. The order we have in here is very important when you're inputting the value. If not, if you miss the order, you might be putting in some value wrongly into your what do you call it? Into your database. So I have the first one, which is the value. Second one, which I am going to put in there, is called the username. The next one, the next one I'm going to put in there is the email. And the last one, which I'm going to put in there, is the password. So when I'm done, then I'll truncate it with a semicolon. This is very important. I'll end it with a semicolon. All right. So once I've been able to now create a query. This is the entire query that is going to hold the information that we are going to put in our database. Let me go back again so you see it well. See, everything we've done seems perfect. We have all our information in there. We seem to be on the right path. All right, so now once we have been able to create our query, the next thing that we have to do is, okay, we've created our query. How do we get it into the database? So we have to first of all call the MySQL query method or function, use the connection string that we already imported or included in our work, and the query that we've created so that it can send the results into our database. So we would create a variable called results. Then this result is going to hold the SQLi query that we have created. And it does that by taking two arguments. So the first argument that it takes is the connection string, which we have created in the connection over here. And because we've included it, we can call on it. And we will also call out the query which we have just created. So that is the query. So we've been able to now create a variable to hold the results that we're going to get from the MySQLi query. This is very important. So please be careful and make sure you go through it one by one and you take your time to make sure you don't miss any step. So we have the results. And the results is going to pick up the SQLi query based on the connection string that we have and also the query that we have created up here. And that is what is going to set into the database. So there are some few things that we might have to also find out if we are on the right path. So we first of all come out with an if statement to find out. So if the results is true, then what do we want to do? So if the results that we've created is true and is sent into the database, what do we want to do? We want to display a new page. So by displaying a new page, so of course it goes into the database. It has to display a page that tells us that the information, that we sent, has gone into the database. So we will have a header. So the header is going to help us come out with a new page. So we are creating a new page that is going to have the location, the value that is going to the value, of course, the location, and we have the view.php. We have not created view.php yet. The view.php is more like the retriever. For a CRUD application, you have the create, retrieve, update, delete. So the retrieve is the information coming from the database for us to see. So that is where the view comes in. Instead of retrieve, we'll be creating the file called view.php that is going to display the information that goes into the database for us to see. So if results, then these are some of the things that we want to see. So else, what we can do is to also, if the query does not make sense, if the query does make sense, then you should open the view.php for us. If it doesn't make sense, then what we want it to do is to now echo to the browser or echo to us that so and so maybe there is an error in your query statement. So please check and try again. Of course, I can concatenate this information by using my SQLi error. So it will also give me more information about the error that we have by spewing out SQL errors, the SQL error that relates to what we have done. So we have the entire thing. So I'm going over again. We have our query that is going to pick up information to our database. We save it into a resource that is going to connect to the database. And we want to check if the results went into the database. If it did, then it should display this new page for us, which is the view.php, which we have not created. If there is an error in the results, then it should tell us that there is an error in the query statement that you stated. So we should try again or work on the code. And by doing that, we also want to have some sort of concatenation. The dots, there's a function that would only display the error, my SQL error that we have. So when we append it to this one, means we want to know the SQL error. Apart from the information that we type in here, we should also be able to see it. All right, so if this is right, let me try and close most of this so you see everything nicely and neatly. All right, so from the first if statement, so if post and so on and so forth, we can end by saying that else we should display the first page, which is the header. The header contains some location, which is the index.html. So index.html, which is our index page. In fact, the entire thing, the whole of this else handles this one. If a set post is submit, if there is no submit, it should still come back to the same page for us. This last else, if it submits, it should still come back to the page for us. So let me do it this way so you get it. So if it sets, if it sets, it means there is a submit for this one. All the content should happen. If not, then it should open the same page for us again. So that is what that last one does. So let's save this and go to our browser to see if everything is in order. Before that, there is this new page we have created, which is view.php. So I would want us to create that page. So we call it view.php. And over there, let me just put some small information here. Content yes to display from the database. Yes. All right, let's go into the browser to see if everything is okay. I'll begin by typing my details. Let's submit. Okay, please fill out this form. First, I need to fill out the form. Let's say Pamiata. Username, let's say Kata. Email kata@gmail.com. Password, let's say Ghana. All right. So let me submit and see if everything is okay. Okay, so I don't want to save this. So it seems everything seemed okay. So it says content yet to display. So, but we are on the view.php page. So it means the information we submitted should at least be in the database. So now let's go into the database to see if it is there. So I'm in the sign up page of the database, sign up table, and you can see I have my first record in here. So I have Kwame Arthur, username K Arthur, email karthur@gmail.com, password Ghana, which is exactly what I did. Now, there is one more thing I want to talk about. Saving password in databases in this way is not the best option. So PHP has something we called um, hashing, which a function called hash, which we can include some of the hash functions to, encrypt the password that we have in our database or in our table. So let's try and create another form and see if we can hash the password. But before that, I would want us to go to the insert.php file folder. And this time round, for the password section, instead of taking the plain text of password and saving it in the database for us to see, this is not the best of option. We would now include a function called hash. Sorry, let me get it at the right place. We will include a function called hash. And the hash is going to take up a first argument of MD5. So MD5 is the type of hashing that I want us to use. Then what are we hashing? This is the information that I want us to hash. Then we will close this one. I'll save this. So I expect that when I send information to the database again with a new record, The password that I'm going to type should be hashed in a way that will not be seen in the database. So let's go back again to the browser. Um, I think I forgot to, yes. So this is what I just did. So I have a password at the password section. I typed a hash. Let me go back again so you see it. So I type hash. I hashed it by using the function hash. So I hashed it, and then the argument that I use for the hashing is MD5. That's the hashing file format that I'm using. This is what I'm using to hash, and I'm hashing the entire password. So I've saved it. Let me go back again to the browser. Now let's try and input some new record into our database. Let me refresh the page. Let's put a new record in there. So I have Emanuela Eshen, and her email address is eeshen@gmail.com. We want to see if the password is hashed. So the password, let's still use Ghana again, and see how this shown. So I'll click on submit. Of course, the fact that we are seeing the view.php means we don't have errors in our code. Of course, we'll come back again to the view.php to display the contents directly from the database. So going back again to the browser, the PHP MyAdmin, let's browse again and see if our new record is there. All right, so you can see from here that we have our new record in here. Emanuela Eshen, Eshen. This time around, the same Ghana password that we use here, which we brought again here, has been hashed with MD5. So we are not seeing the password. And this is the best practice to save passwords in databases. So in a situation where somebody hacks your database or is able to have access to your database, it doesn't see passwords of people. So always make sure you use the hash function of PHP and use any of the hash methods that are available. I use the MD5, the other ones that are available. You can Google and search and look for those and use in your project. But hash MD5 is good enough for your project. All right, so you should also recall that the username ID, we didn't input it in our VS Code. We just went straight ahead to now work on it because we didn't want to display those ones. All right, so now we've been able to create records into the database. Now let's retrieve it. And the retrieval is going to come from the view.php. So that is where we're going to put up our information. We're going to retrieve all our information from there. All right, so let's try and create the view.php, which we have. Now we have the view page displaying content here to display from the database. So instead of going through this route, going through the PHP MyAdmin to see the content we have here, I would want us to now display the contents we have in the database inside the view page of the CRUD application. That is the retrieve aspect. So we are retrieving the contents here from the database over here. So we can put it in here. This is the best practice. It's always not the best of ways to give access to anybody to your database. The reason being, if something, most times, most database tables are linked with other tables. So a mistake or if something should happen to the database can, have some sort of effect on your entire script that you created. So it's always best to give people access to your database through the creation of maybe a script that they will be viewing those information from without having to go into the database directly. All right, so that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to come back again to the VS Code. So the content we have in here, I'm going to delete it. But of course, the way I want the view.php to display, I want it to look something similar to what we have in the HTML index.html page. So what I'm going to do is to copy all the contents I have here in the index.html page, bring them to view.php and save this. So going back again to the browser, when I refresh the page, you can see I have the nav bar showing with the registration and so on and so forth. So what I have in here, I'm going to delete them because I don't like what is here, but I want it to rather display the information. I just want to get some information in here. So quickly, I'm going to delete those information from the page. So inside the VS Code, you can see it says creating container to hold the content. So I had a container that was holding the form information that we had here. So I'm going to remove everything that I have in here. And again, I'm going to change the name of the page. So it's going to be the CRUD, maybe view page. View page, as you can see over here. So I have the CRUD view page. So I just deleted I just deleted the table. So I'll save it again, go back to the browser, press the page, and let's see what will display. So you can see it's vanished. So we're now going to find a way to populate the information right inside the view page. So all I have to do is to edit the page. So instead of having the title as, I've changed it to view page or view records or whatever I want to. Let's say view record page. All right. Then I'm maintaining the style sheet and the wave icon. The body class that I have, I'm going to still maintain that. The nav class and so on and so forth. And creating container to hold the content. So this is where I'm going to do most of the things. That for the creation of the navigation is here. So we're now with the navigation bar. This is where we have the creating content, the container to hold the content that we want to come out from the database. So these are some few things that I have in here. So the div class, as we have right after the role, instead of using the class large 6, I want to use the entire column. And I'll use auto for this particular one and still maintain these ones. Now I want to have an H3 with a different class, but this time around I'm not going to use this, but rather I'm going to use not BG. I'm not going to use BG info, but rather I'm going to use BG secondary. But those colors have all been stated inside the bootstrap file. So the secondary, this is how secondary looks like. There's a color for secondary. So background of secondary, instead of using the info, which is this one, info, which is this color, I'm going to use the secondary, which is this color. It is more of gray also. All right, so let me close this one. Yes, so I'll save this, go back again to the browser to see how it's going to display. I expect it to be a little longer. All right, so longer. So now let's change the title over here to something Well, the information we are displaying, in fact, everything we have here is what is going to be going to display here. So it will be best to make it a little wider. That's why I changed it from I changed the column from 6 to normal column length using the auto. All right. If you want more information, just visit the Bootstrap page and you'll see all those. So let's go back again to the VS Code. So from here, we have our cards. We've been able to do that. So I would want us to create a button that would make it easier for us to also load information or also create or add a link or create a button that will help us link the previous page, which is where we had a sign up page. So in doing that, I will start by going through coming out with maybe a paragraph, a P tag or P element, and I will have maybe have a link which will have a class. Of course, I'm going to link it to the index dot let's say HTML page. So this I'm creating a class. I'm creating a link directly under this, which is going to be a button that when I click on it, it takes us to the index.html page where we get to insert or create new records for our applicant or whoever is registering or signing up. So I'll give a class ID, sorry, a class name, to this particular A attributes, which is the A link attributes, and I'll call that the bootstrap the bootstrap class that we have a button and a button info. So that is what I'm specifying, and I want the text to be the text that is going to write in there to be white. And what I intend having inside there is going to be maybe something that looks more like maybe add a new record or add new. So that will be part of this one. So the link is going to be, let's say, add new record. I think that makes it easier and a little nicer for us to see what's going on. Right. So when I save this, and I go back again to my browser, refreshing the page, this is what I see. Let's see. Right, so I have a button here. So when I click on this one, it takes me to the registration or sign up page for me to register. So I have a button, and now under it, I'm going to display all the records that we have in the PHP MyAdmin. But of course, you can see there are some few things that I need to do to be able to display that. So going back again to the VS Code, what I can do is to start the creation of, let's say, sorry, just a minute. We'll start the creation of this. It was in it's a table actually, so I'm going to come out with a table that will hold the information that I want to put in there. So I'll start by typing a table. And we know how to create tables. After tables, we have our table head or maybe table row. And within a table row, we have our table data, so TD. And we can have so many table data as possible. So I have user ID and all right, so holding down the shift alt down. So shift alt down would duplicate this information for us. So I can I'll change this one to full name. Change this one to the next one, which was username, and the last one, which was email. Of course, I'm not displaying the password because it's of no use over here. So we have the email. Then I would want to have another table head where I can call, maybe I can call it maybe action. That is going to hold what I want to do in there. So when I save this, go back again to the browser. I'm going back again to the browser, refreshing the page. You can see I have a table created here. Unfortunately, of course, the table does not have a border outline and all of that. So I'm going to add some CSS, bootstrap CSS around the table to make it look more beautiful. So I'll go back again to the VS Code. And inside the VS Code for the table, I'm now going to give it a class. Of course, this class is already in the bootstrap. The class will have a name. The name of the class is going to be table. This is going to act on the table and also table border. We're adding table border to this particular one. So we say it is bordered. And when we save this, we go back again to our browser, we should see some little change in what we have over here. You can see now it's beginning to look a little better. So this is a CSS that's already inside the bootstrap. So now we can now start populating the records one by one. Of course, let's go back again to our VS Code. So now inside our VS Code, what we now have to do is, at the moment, we've been able to come out with what we call, we've been able to come out with the table heads. Of course, somebody might have also used TH, and that is for the table heads for our browser, like this one, so that it becomes bold. That can also work. I just decided to use TR just to make it TD just to make it simpler. All right, so now this part is very crucial. What do we want to do? Because we are already working in a PHP file, it means we can now integrate some PHP codes to now go into the database and also pull information. So we can now begin by inside a TR, we can now begin by creating a PHP script. So you know the skeleton for PHP. So we have PHP and the closing tag for PHP. Let me bring it in here. But of course, if you want to integrate PHP in our code and also call the database, then it means we first of all have to now require once or include the connection string from the connection.php file, which we already have in our work side. That's a connection. We need to now bring it in to be able to connect to the database to now pull the information for us. So in the view, we'll go to the top. Then we'll call out the connection string to be able to pull those ones, the PHP information for us. And you already know how to do that. So I'm going to quickly put out the skeleton for PHP and close it. Now make it, be careful, this is PHP. So if you use HTML, you can't include PHP files in there. That is very important. So what we're going to do is to require ones, just like what we did the last time. So require ones. And what are we requiring? We're going to include this information, which is the file we have inside the include folder, which is the connection.php. So you recall that anytime you write a PHP syntax, we have to always end with a semicolon. The next one is also to now create a query which will go into our database. We can create a variable called query, and this whole query is supposed to go into our database and retrieve the information from us. So if you want to retrieve information from a database, what we do is to use the select statement. So select from the table where so and so and so, where the column this and column this is equal, column this is equal to this and column this is equal to that. So that's the information that we are looking out for. In our case, we want to pull out all the information from from our database. So we select from the sign up page. Means you are pulling out every information that we have in there. We don't need to be specific on which column we want to pull out information or records from. So I'll come back again to the view page. And this time around, the creation of the query, this is how the query is going to look like. So I'm using a select statement. So select star. If you use star, it means you want to pull out every information from the database. From, of course, the table I want to put out information is called sign up. I'll end with a semicolon. And once I have this, I've been able to create a query. Then I need to create a variable called results that will hold the query that I'm going to pull out from a database. And that is going to be linked to what my SQLi query. Of course, that also takes some arguments, and the argument it takes is the connection string, what is the connection, and also the query that we have just written with this query. Then we will end it. So this required ones connects us to the connection.php. Then this is the query that we're going to pull out all the information from the database. So let's start from select all from sign up. And we're now using the results to now hold the MySQL query based on the connection that's in the query that we have put in there. But this side is very important. Make sure you don't miss a steps. Your semicolons are very important. Make sure you don't miss any of these steps. So once you've been able to import the connection string and add our query and results, we can now proceed and continue with our PHP scripts. So now that is a very good thing that we've just done. So this side is very key. I'm sure in Python you know of how iterations are done. You know of a while loop and for loop and so on and so forth. So in this case, we're going to create a while loop that is going to hold that is going to go through our database and fetch all the results that we need. So in doing that, we would create a while loop, and inside that, we'll create a variable called row, and this variable is going to hold all the MySQLi, all the results that we are going to get from the SQLi and loop through it. So while this information is true, it should do something and so on and so forth. So we have the row SQLi, and this time round we have fetch assoc. That is a function or method that is already in PHP that goes into our database and also pull out information from us for us. So it's a function, so it also takes some arguments. So the argument it takes is the results that we have created at the top of our page. There is a result that we created in here. This result that we want to display. That is what we are going to fetch and give to our SQLi ASOC function. The SQLi fetch ASOC function. So that is what it's going to do. So in here, we would now put in certain things that is going to hold our records for us. So now, what we're going to do is to create individually some variables to hold whatever record that we intend putting in here. So we create a variable called ID, user ID, and that is going to pick up row. And what is it picking up from the row? It's going to use, we want to go into our database, look for the row that has a column user ID and populate the information for us one by one. So user ID, we'll truncate it with the semicolon. We move to the next one, we create another variable called full name. And we also would go through the same role again. And what we are pulling this time around is going to be the full name. But these names are the ones that I so it's actually the names of the attributes we have in the database. So full name, we'll truncate to a semicolon. Let me go back again to the database so you see what I'm doing. We don't miss anything. Inside the database, these are the attributes that I'm picking up. I'm calling one by one and saving it in a different record, in a variable. So I'll call this one, this, and so on and so forth. I don't have that of the password, so I will not really use it. So that is what I'm doing. So let's go back again to the VS Code so you can continue and appreciate what I'm doing now. All right, so I have another variable, but I'm sure by now you know the next variable I'm going to call up, which is going to be a username, and that is going to hold, that is going to pull out the row, which is going to the database, look out for the row that has user underscore name as the attribute of our column. And the last one, of course, as you guessed right, is going to be that of the email. So I'm going to create another variable called email. So email, and what is going to hold is it's going to go through the row, and look out for the email. Please ending with a semicolon is very key so that you don't make mistake. All right, so the moment I'm done pulling out this information, so now I said while the role is equal to, while this whole statement is true, I would want it to now start populating records for each of the rows, the role information. So when it comes to user ID, right, it should pull out the first user ID. When it comes to full name, it should pull out the first full name, and so on and so forth into the records. I don't want to miss any of them. So for the while statement, you can see I started with, it's actually in a what do you call it, in a curly brackets. So now when I'm done over here, I want to close. I'll close this. PHP. I'm still within the PHP. I'm not actually done, but I still need to now come out with new table rows so that I will not miss the records that are going to be populated one by one. So in a table, just like how we did table, we are now going to create a table row that is going to populate the records one by one. So I will start with, TR. And within the TR, we have some records called TD and so on and so forth. So I would have TD. The first TD that we are pulling out is going to be the first record in our database but for the first username record in our database. And because we've closed the PHP, we now have to open another PHP to be able to put in the records in there. So this record will have to reside inside this particular PHP code. These are HTML codes. So anytime we want to pull or use echo or pull out information from the database, we make sure we start with the PHP again. Mind you, I close the PHP from this particular site. So from here to here, PHP is closed. And and the table has not been populated. I need to go through it one like a for loop one by one to be able to populate all the records. That is why I've closed the first part of the while loop, and I've not closed the second part of the while loop. So because I want to now populate the table data one by one for each of the columns that I have in here, that I have under each of them. You know how to create a table. So this you should be able to understand. All right. So the first one is going to echo. So I'm going to display what I have as the user ID, which is the first ID. This one, the user ID that I have here. Of course, I could have chosen to remove all of this and just call the name by rows instead of having to create a variable and do it one by one as you see over here. I could have just said echo the whole of this, echo the whole of this, and that would also work. And when you save them in variables, it makes it easier to to work with. So I'll call the first ID. So it's going to pull out number one for me. It will populate it. Let me go back again to the browser so you see it. So when I go to the browser over here, this number one will now be placed under this. That is what I'm working on. The whole of this is table row. There is also another table row. These are table data. So from here, I have my table rows. I'm going to populate the while is going to go through my database table, populate one here, populate the full name, populate username, email. That is for the while loop. It still has not been able, it's still not done. So we come back again. And while we still have more records, it goes to the second one to populate the values. If there are more, it will go and populate the values before we close the while loop. That is what I'm doing. So I'll go back again to the VS Code and quickly I'm going to now, I'm sure you guessed right. So Control Alt down will display some few other for me. So the next one that I want to echo is not username, but this time around I'm going to echo full name. I'm also going to echo username. The last one I'll echo the email. So now I've been able to populate the first part. That is row one, the records. That is the row one, table row. I've been able to populate the first part. So while the table row is equal to my SQL fetch ASOP, the results populate these records. When you are done, then what we have to do is we can have another table row for the another table data for the next one, which is meant for let's say TD. After the email, the next one we had was TD. And the TD, what I intend putting in there was maybe let's say edit, and the next one possibly let's say delete. Of course, I'll come back again to make these ones as links or buttons so that it becomes easier to click on them to do some few corrections. All right, so when we're done with these ones, you can see we've been able to now populate the first row. So we can now close our PHP tab, our PHP our PHP code that we started. So we can now open and close this particular tab. So I can come in here, type in PHP, and I'll close it correctly. So I've been able to close this. I'll save this one. And let's go to the browser and see what happens. Let's refresh the page. Okay, so we've been able to populate these records. 1, 2, and these are things that are already in our database. These are records that we put in a database. We seem to have a paragraph, a PHP code somewhere here. Let's look for it and delete it. It's on top, directly under before user ID. So let's go back again to our VS Code and try and locate it and delete it. For user ID, this one. Whether user ID. Let me. Okay, so that is this one. We're already closing it here, so it becomes irrelevant. So let's remove this. Instead of closing here, we already have one that is already closing, so let's just remove it. All right, so save it back again. Go back again to the browser, refresh the page, and let's see what happens in there. Let's go back first. Excuse me. Okay, so that's gone. So we have all our records in there. So all these information, so we are now retrieving the information. Of course, let's remove the registration form from here. Let's give it the rights and the rights details. So I go back again. Let me just give it the right details. Instead of using registration, I want us to use we call it registration somewhere here. So the registration form, instead of that, let's use maybe let's say okay. Let's say list of registered members. List of registered members. So there's we have done the creation, retrieval, list of registered members, retrieval of registered members. Let's say retrieval list. So that's the retrieval section. Let's say retrieval of registered members. All registered members. Yes, maybe this retrieval. So I'll go back again to the browser, refresh the page. Now I think all we're doing conforms with what we want to do. All right, so we've been able to now create. So if you want to create, we can click on this one to create to take us to the registration page or the sign up page to fill out for a new person. So let's say if you want to add another person, let's say Sandra. Ejiru. So username probably S Ejiru. Email maybe S Ejiru at gmail.com. the password, let's say so and so. I'm not so concerned about the password. So yes, so I'll click on submit. And yes, you can see from here that we now have our new record, which is Sandra, that has been added to our page. Now you can also see that at the action section, I have edit and delete. So that is going to cater for the updates and also deletes of our CRUD application. So when I click on the edit, it means I'll be taken to maybe a page where I can edit the information in that particular record. So I want us to create links to these particular pages that when we click would do such actions. So I'll go back again to the VS Code and now put in the links that would hold the edit and also the deletion for us to be able to update and also delete records in our database, the database table. So from here we had, so let's look for where we had edit and delete. So that is where it is. As I said, I want us to use what we call the button. I want us to have a link to this. So I'll wrap it around like a link. So I'll create an A link. And this is going to possibly go to maybe a file called, let's say, update.php. So that is going to do the updating for us. So instead of edit, let me use update. Update record. So I'll bring the whole of this updates record inside here. Then the next one, I'm also going to have another A link, A elements. And this will be maybe delete.php. Of course, I'm going to bring this delete in here. So these are now going to be links. And these are places that it will go. So I can save this. First, let me create these two pages. I can call it, let me just use edit. That's just to make it look more understandable. So let's say edit.php, also delete.php. Let me use edit. Just for simplicity's sake. So I'll create these two PHP files over here. So I'll come again, create a new file called edit.php, create another file also called delete.php. We'll come back again to those files. But still on the view page, let us try and complete this. So I'll save this, go back again to the browser. Let's see how it looks like. So when I refresh the page, you can see now these are all now clickable links that we can click. If I click on this one, it will go to the edit page, which is here, but I've not put up any information in there. The delete will do the same thing. But it doesn't really look nice. Let's try and make it more like a pattern over here, like adding a bootstrap class to it. So I'll go back again to this section, and I'll add a class to this. So I'll create a class, and this time round, the class I'm going to give it a name. Let's use the button. I'm going to use the button. So use the bootstrap button, and is the info color that we really need, and the text that will be written on the text which we have as edits. We want to use white. So we beautified this particular link by making it as a button. Let's do the same thing for this one too as well. So we can have it also, and give it a class. In the class, we can first give it a button, btn. Also give it btn. Which of the colors do we want to use? Is it info? It depends on whichever one that we want to use. We can use, instead of info, use danger. The danger comes in the color of possibly red. The text color I want us to use white. That is the color that is going to display the delete. I want us to be white. So I'll save that. Then I'll go back again to the browser. Let's see how it shows. Going back again to the browser, refresh the page so you can see now our website is looking a little more nicer. Yes, so we can still continue, but of course, we want it to be in such a way that when we click on this, it's going to give us only this record, Kwame Ata and whatever, so that we can edit it, but not any other record. So we need to put some sort of get ID so that it will pick the right ID for us, so that we'll be able to edit it based on what we have in here. So if we want to edit only this particular one, that means we have to create a function called get ID and specify the ID by the name of the user ID. If it's one, then one. So we will be able to edit the one itself. So that is done through this process. I'll go back again to the VS Code. Then for the edit, we can have right after the edit.php, we can have this created as maybe get ID. So we'll pick the right ID, and what is going to hold is another PHP file. Sorry, another PHP. So we're going to echo that particular username that we already have. So this the username that we have in here. For that particular role is, so we should pick that particular role's user ID so that we don't miss anything. So that is how this is going to be. Mind you, when you want to make it dynamic, it means you have to include a PHP tag again. So far, everything we've done was HTML. So if you want to make it dynamic, then it means you have to find a way to include the PHP and closing and opening tag. That is very important. So now let's do the same for the other one, which is the delete, which is this one. So in the same way, you can give it any name. I use get ID. You can also say fetch ID, because that is what you're going to call. You can use anything. So we can have a question mark. You can probably say delete. So del, del, which probably stands for delete all. You can just say del is equal to, because we want to delete based on the ID that we are working with. And what are we working with? The ID. That is the user ID, which we have already created up there. User ID. So that is the ID that we are trying to pick. So we shouldn't pick any other thing, but rather the user ID for that particular role that we are working on. We don't have to miss any of the rows. We don't have to edit any row which is not relevant. And the IDs are the ones that we declared over here, which we've saved our assigned to this particular ID. So that's what we use to pull out those information. So I'll save this one, come back again to the browser. Then when I refresh the page, it's still the same thing. But this time around, when I hover over ID, you should see that at the bottom of the page, somewhere here, at the bottom somewhere here, hover, you can see I have the get ID is equal to 1, which is the ID for this particular element. for this particular record. And this one is also get ID equal delete is equal to 1. So we want to delete the first one. If we move on to the others two, the same way, and see ID of 2, delete of 2, and so on and so forth. So that is how it works. So now we are in to create the edit page. So we go back again to the VS Code. Then we would go to the edit page. You can see the edit page has no information. So what I would want us to do is like what we did earlier. We went to the HTML page. In fact, actually everything that we're doing looks more like, at least the workflow looks exactly the same. So I'll paste it here, then we will edit it so that we'll use that record to continue our work. All right, so I'll go back again. So I'll save this. Those of you, as you start working with PHP and understand how to do include ones and so on, you can have just one file holding most of the things that you think will be the same for all your pages. So you just call it or include it once in your PHP without having to copy and paste like what I'm doing now. So that is a little advanced and out. Now you know how to include connection PHP to your page. So it's the same way. You can have a page, then that holds maybe an information that looks similar to this, then you can just call on them and use them. All right, so for the edit page, what I want to edit is the record. So if I come back again to this, if I try to go to the edit page, let's see. Let's say edit, and see it is taking me to this particular page, which is exactly like what I'm looking for. That's the registration form. But I want us to edit the record that we have in here. So, it took me to the registration page, which is the edit page. Of course, because we selected get ID of 1, it should populate us with the information for this particular individual so that we can do the addition over here. All right, so let's go back again to the VS Code. Let's go to the VS Code. We'll do a little corrections in here. Okay, so I would want us to change the page title. Let's try and change the page title over here and probably use, let's say, it's a page title. So that's what's the registration page or the sign up page. This time around, I want us to change the page title to update registration form. All right, so update registration form. Then at the bottom where we have the title of the page, this registration form, I want us to change it to something more relatable, which is the same as update registration form. So update registration form in PHP instead of registration form in PHP. So let's save it, go back again and see if what we have is what we're looking for. All right, so I think this is beautiful. Our page is also there. So I think this is beautiful. We can just go back again and do our corrections. So quickly. So now, yes, to be able to now update the records that we have, what we have to do is to make sure we want to populate when we click on edit, we want to, because the individual had already filled the form, we need to populate the previous record for them to now update with the new record. So we need to populate it inside the page that we saw, inside the page that's inside the form element that the form text, the form section that we have here. We need to populate those records in there based on the ID that we selected. All right. So, and that population would also be possible if we get it from the database, because all records are in the database. So what we have to do is, of course, to now go and have some sort of connection to the database and put up a query and get all those records for us. So we do that by, first of all, creating the normal PHP and closing tab for the PHP, and we will now required once again, just like the other one. Required once. What are we requiring once? That is the page that contains the connection, which is the include connection. Of course, after every PHP statement, we end with a semicolon. So please don't forget to add your semicolon. Then we'll create a variable to hold each of the things that we're looking for. So we have the user ID. The user ID, what are we looking out for? Because we are using the get method this time around, we're not going to use post. So we use the get. I told you, find out the reason when we use the get and when we use the post. So get, sorry. Then we would, the variable we use as the get method, we would now specify it in here. We use get. For the deletion, we will use delete. So get ID. That is what we use for our work. So end with a semicolon. Then this time round, of course, we have to create another query to hold the information for the query. That's the SQL query that we're going to write to retrieve the information. Be mindful here that if you want to edit information, we first of all need to retrieve it and update it. So update table set column equals so and so and so, as you can see here. So that is the SQL query that we're going to use. First of all, we'll have to select it, then we can do the updating and the update. So we select the records that we want, then after we'll do the updation and updates of the records. All right, so quickly going back again to the edit, the query that we were looking for. First, we are going into the database, and inside we are going to select all the records from the sign up page, sign up table. What we are looking for is where the user ID, sorry, user ID. The user ID is the same as what is in the database. The writing here is what is in the database. Now we are dealing with MySQL, so we have to be careful what we type in here. Where the user ID, ideally, we can now use a single quote so that we don't truncate the double quotes. It's equal to user. That is the user ID that we have in here. We truncate it with our double quotes. Please take your time and understand this. So from here, you can see we have our select statement. So that's a query. So select start from sign up, where user ID is equal to ideally the equal to, we're supposed to have a double quote, but because we don't want to truncate this code, we are using this one. So where the user ID would have been the user. So this code ends here, and this code ends this code, and this code, and this code ends this code. So we don't miss any of it on any of this. But this is very important. Make sure you don't miss it. Then we have our results, which is the statement that we're going to put in here. Results is going to hold my SQLi query. And what it's going to do is to hold the connection string and also the query. So this is very key. Now, we've been able to create a variable called user ID, and that is going to pick up the ID that we appended to the edit site. That is the ID that we appended to the edits in the view, from this view, for the button. Whatever we put in here, the edits, this is the ID I'm talking about. We've been able to now create it to hold it, and we have a query that is selecting the start from the sign up where the user ID is equal to user ID, which is this one. So the same selection, please be mindful that select from star where column is equal to, see, where user ID is equal to, and in quotes. You can see in quotes, whatever we have is in quotes. So the same way that we have over here inside the edit. So whatever we have here is supposed to be in a single quote. Because we're working with PHP, we're working with MySQL. I don't want to also truncate this selection statement. That is why we put it in this code and use these ones. You don't want to miss anything. All right, so now we have this information. So we will have to find a way to now go through the database and pull out the information one by one. So what we do is to use a while loop. So while the row, just like how we did the other one, while row is equal to my SQLi, underscore fetch sock, and it's associative array based on the results that we already have. It's a function, so it takes an argument. The argument that it takes is the results that we have in here. While it has this information, then we would want it to do some few other things for us. So that is where we'll start the creation of those individual things that we created. So the username, just like how we came out with the view. So let me just go and copy those ones so we can be a little quick. I just want us to be quick, that's all. Okay. All right, so we have the user ID. We're picking up the role, the full name, the username, the email. This time around, we might want to also pick up the password, because the user might want to change the password that he probably used for the first one. So password, and have a variable called password to hold a password variable. So we use the row. Then this time around, we don't want to display the password to the user, but rather we want the user to now enter a password instead of displaying what we have. What we will display for the person will be gibberish. maybe for now I can just use this one so that you understand the password. I'll save this one. As I said, we have already hashed the password. So when we picking up the content in the database, which is the hash password, it will look gibberish to the user. So it will be best not to fetch the password, but rather force them to now have to create a new password using the hash function. And of course, I said the hash function takes in two arguments. It takes the type of hashing that you want to do, which we normally use the MD5, and that is based on the the post record that the user is going to put in there. So we have a post. So in there we can have password. That's the same way as what we did the last time. So that should also work. So after we close out, so this one will go through the rows and fetch all those individual and fetch the right user uh, the get ID based on the user ID that we have specified. We've assigned to it, so it populates those records. So these are the information that we have. It will go into the database, look out for an ID that is similar to that is for that particular record to populate those information for us. So now we can go into our table and then make the necessary addition that we need. So we can go into the section where we have these information in there. So we have, instead of using a placeholder phone name, this time round we can put in the actual value that we need for the page. But before we do that, we have to be mindful that when we click on the form action, instead of inserting, we are actually using, when we insert, instead of using insert.php, we are actually pushing it to view.php so that we see the corrections that we probably made. So we use view. So when we edit, it should go into view.php. Just a minute, let me see. No, is that we'll have to create a file maybe for updates.php. We need to create one for updates.php that is going to hold the updates. So you go into a database and look for the ID and updates those records. So we create a we have to create a file called updates.php that is going to hold those ones. So let me create it quickly. Updates.php. All right, but we'll come back again to it when we complete with this one. So here we have the input text, full name, form control. Then instead of having we have a placeholder, and we already have some records that we want to display. So that is the information in there. So to override what is there. So we would add the value attributes. Sorry, the value attributes. And what the value attribute is going to do is to just a minute. What the value attribute, let me bring it here so we can have it right. Let me see, okay. So what the value attribute is going to do is to put up the value that is from the database. So the type value is equal to value is equal to, because we want to have the value from the PHP, because we've already put up the SQL connection at the top of this page. So we want to spew out the full name That is what we have. We've created up here, full name and so on. These ones. I want to populate those records down here. So we'll echo the full name. So the same way, we'll put up a value here too. So that's also going to hold PHP. Cool. And instead of full name is going to be username. We'll close the PHP tag. We'll do the same for the next one. Let me copy and paste so that's a bit quick. So this will be password, or is it email? And this one will be password. Okay, so I think we have very good records for the password. We don't want to echo the password. Well, let's remember we didn't want to echo the password because it was gibberish. So we want them to now type their one. So I think this should be okay. Then after the button, instead of calling it submit, to say maybe update record. Yes, so let's see. Let's go to the browser and let's see how it's going to look like. I hope we don't have any errors. So I'll go back again to this particular page. Let me pick the first record. So I expect to see, okay, see, we have the content, the information of Kwame. Kwame required. Is that a name? Kwame Arthur. Why do we have required? Let's see. What field is that? Username. So let's see. Username. It has Kwame, but it's a, so something is not right. Let's see. Let's go again. So required. It's supposed to call the username. So let's go to the PHP the VS Code. Let's see. So we haven't required instead of. So that's for the username. There's supposed to be an error somewhere. Username, name, full name, value, username. Let's see. Let's go up there to see the records we have. It's username. We use small n. PHP is case sensitive, so please let's be mindful of some of these things, else we would be missing, having some issues. It's capital N. Right, so I've saved it. Let's go back again to our browser. And let's see what is going to display for us. All right, so we have the Kwame after here. Of course, just to be clear, let's pick a different one. So Emmanuel Aishen. So you see, we have the right records in here. Then we can now put up our new page. So we need a new password. We can tap it here and say update record. Unfortunately, the update record page has not been created, so we need to create it. So we have these records. We've been able to do that for the edition. We've been able to pull the information and display it inside pull the information from the database and display it in here. The exception of the password, waiting for the user to now update it. So now when you click on the updates, it's supposed to pick based on the get ID 2, go into the database and do the and updates the records that we have in here. so that it will show the corrections that we make will show inside this particular page, the updates page. So now let's go and create the updates.php that is going to do the updating for us. So we go back again to the VS Code. Then let's open the updates.php. All right. Okay, now we are in the update.php, but let's be mindful. I think I might have missed something here. For the edits, we copied and pasted the content that we had here and we pasted and did some corrections in there. Now the name we have here is no more submit, but rather we are updating for this particular button. So the name we need to change this to update so that we can now check for if it's set for updates. Then we can do certain things in the updates page. So now let's start with the updates page. So just the same way, we first of all would have to create our PHP connection. We have to call it because we already created it in the connection file. What we do is to required ones. Once we have the required ones, then we will, because it's the location of the file that we are looking for, which is inside the include folder, and it's also in the connection PHP connection.php file. Every PHP needs to close with a semicolon. Once we've done, the next thing is because we are updating the record, just like we were inserting, we created what we call, we have to check for if it's set, if the update post is set. So we use the if is set. And what we are looking out for the if is set is the post method for that particular is if is set. So, and of course, what we are looking at for this time round is not submit, but rather updates. So we are looking for the if is set for updates. If that is set, then we can continue and we can proceed with what we want to do. And these were the information that we were going to, all these information are what's going to populate in there. If all these ones have been set, so we look out for, that's the same as the insert. Remember we had if is set for submit, then we had these information, user ID, username, and so on and so forth. The same way. This time around, let's copy the content for this one and use that one. So I'll copy these ones and paste it in here. So if it's set, we set up we create a variable called user ID that will hold not the user ID per se, not what we pull out from the database. But let me not get you confused. Let me copy this one. This is more appropriate. Let's use this one. You don't get more confused. I'm still working on the updates. So quickly. So if it's set, then we are creating variables for user ID. In the user ID, we already have something that we have already created with the get method. So we use the get method. This time around is the ID that we have specified. Please, so you don't get confused, the ID we have here, we come to the view, the ID that we had for the button. Let's see. We have our get ID. I was taking this particular ID. Please don't get confused. So we come back again. So we are picking the get ID, an ID from here. So we have user ID is equal to get ID. Then we have a full name, username, email address, and also the password. Then we're going to create our database query. That will reside somewhere here. So we'll create a query. So query. And that is going to hold this is how I said we were going to update. These are the SQL commands: update table. Then we will set the column value. That's the value where column is equal to something. So this is the query that we're going to use in our SQL statement. I'll go back again to the edit. Sorry, the updates with PHP. So now we put up the right query in here. So that is update sign up set full name. Full name is the same as what we have in our database. To be equal to, we don't want to truncate the quotes, so we will use single quotes. So full name, that is what we have created here. So full name, we'll end it, we'll close it. Please don't take your time so you don't mess it. This closes this. I'm just using a concatenation to be able to continue with what we are writing. This closes the last one. So we are continuing. We can continue on the next page. It will still work. Or we can still continue writing. So we have to update the next one. Sorry. So we're done with the full name, comma, the username. Also, that's the name in the database. Which is equal to user name. You need to close it. You can go to the next one, which is the email. So email us email. I just don't want us to miss anything. Email is equal to email, and the last one, which is the password. Password. That's the column for the password. And we have this. It's the password. It's the quotes in there. Then we can continue by saying where user ID is equal to, that is the username, the user ID, sorry. Okay, that's a long one there. So please just be careful, take your time, go through it little by little so you don't miss any of the step. Else you're going to get error and we'll have to come back again to correct it. Once we have the query created, then we need to create a results to also hold the query. Results. For the results, we're going to use I hope I use it. Let's use a capital for the Y. Y. Okay. All right, so the results is going to hold the MySQL query. And that is going to contain the connection string together with the query that we just created. Truncate with a semicolon. So now we now have to find a way to see, to check if the result is okay. So if the result has no issue, what do we do then? If we have no, it has no issue, then we should move the page to the view page, which is the header. And it has the location of view.php. So if everything is okay, it should take us to the view.php to see the update that we've done. Else, if it's not, then it should rather tell us the error message so we can do the correction. Else, it should echo to us that please check your query. So we can do that right, then we can check for the error and also correct it. So once we're done, then we can. So if all this is set, updates has issue, there is no updates, whatever, then we should have an else statement somewhere here. And what it's going to do is have an else statement somewhere here. And what it's going to do is to make sure we are taken to the view page. That is a header, application, and it's being taken to the view.php page. Okay, so that is how this is going to be. Right, so I think, let's see, I hope we don't have more corrections to be done. Let's go. Let's go to the browser and let's check if everything is okay. I refresh the page, this is working. I go to the editing page, this is working. Let's add 22 to everything here. Maybe 2222. So we click on updates. Oh, we have an error. So now let's try and see update.php line 29. We have an unexpected this. So line 21, let's check. We might have missed something. Okay, so it's line 29, unexpected this. Okay, so be mindful anytime we have our PHP code, we put up a PHP function or whatever, you have to terminate it with a semicolon. I omitted that one. So let's go back again. Let's refresh the page. Let's see. Let's refresh the page and let's see. So let's resend the information. Bingo. Right now, let's see if we can do. Let's add the 222 to it. This is the way to see if everything is okay. Unfortunately, it didn't add a 333 to it. So let's see. It means you're unable to get the right data and update it. So let's check our updates query again to do the correction. Because it wasn't able to get the ID and update it, let's look out for the ID in the edit page. Let's see. So we're supposed to get the ID for updates. So we'll look out for the form action yes here. So form action updates. And we're supposed to use ID here. Where I just like how we did that for the other one. So we have ID and we use our PHP code. Open and close of the PHP. What we intend putting here is we're going to echo the user ID variable. This has already been created, I believe. Yeah, let's use our ID variable. We use the user ID variable here. So the ID is equal to the user ID variable that we have here. That will uniquely make it easier. Please don't get confused. For the view, remember we went through the same process. We added the get ID and the user ID here. For the deletion too, we wanted to be able to pick the right ones. So the deletion too, we added del to it. So in the same way, for the edits, we want to be able to uniquely call the update.php based on the ID that we put in here, the user ID that we are picking up, which is the first row, the second row, or whatever row you're looking for. So this is very crucial. I believe that is why we were able to get it updated. So now let's go back again to the browser and see what happens. I'll go back again to the browser. I'll refresh the page. Let me try and edit somebody else. Let's say Sandra. Let's add 333, 333, 333, and the password maybe 333. Let's update and see what happens. Okay, so you can see it's been updated. So we have Sandra 333, 73333. So it means everything that we've done works. If we try to refresh the page or browse in the main database, you can see we have our password also created. So everything is working perfectly. So if we're able to create records into a database, retrieve the records as you can see here, update the records as we have seen here, and also we've been able to now we left to the point where we have to delete a record that we have in here. That is the last stage for this exercise for the CRUD application. So let's try and go through the deletion for the CRUD application. So I already have the delete over here. So what are we deleting? So we have the delete PHP file already created here. All right, the deletion looks a little similar to the update. So just in the same way, there are certain things that we need to keep in mind when we want to create the PHP for deletion. So you already know these basic ones. So we have our PHP opening and closing tags. And what we first of all do is to required ones, and within it we have the include, going to include the connection string. And once we have the connection string right, then we have to now check for if to see if it's set for the deletion for get actually is available. So if it's set, I check in on the get function. If it's set for get, once we use del for delete, I'm sure you remember we use del for delete for this. Let me go back again so you can see it. Those I have forgotten. We use del during the view stage over here. For edit, we use get ID, and for deletion, we use del over here. That is what we use. So this is what we are calling for the get method. So you can see we have the get. Sorry, yeah. So this is the deletion. So if it's set get delete, it's this. And these are the things that we really need. We're going to create a variable called user ID. And that user ID is going to hold the get ID, the del itself. That is a del that we've already created in there. Then the next one is to create our own query. You know how the query is as the SQL query to hold the deletion. Now, if we go back again to our queries, we go back again to our queries. For the SQL commands, for the deletion, we have delete from. For the deletion, we have delete from table where column is equal to a value. So where column is equal to the ID of one, where ID, user ID is equal to maybe 1. So it means the row for ID, which is 1, should be deleted. So going back again to the delete. But these are things that we normally do. We've been doing just like what we did for the updates. It's the same thing that we had in here. For the updates, we're using the post. And for the deletion, we're using the get. The reasons and why we use get and post. So you should find out. Already told you to check out those ones. So now we're going to write the SQL query to hold this information. So let me bring my semicolon so I don't forget and go in. So based on what I showed you here inside the SQL command, so there's a delete from table, delete from sign up, where user ID is equal to maybe the get ID, that's user ID that we have created, or user ID that we've created. All right, so let's go back again to the delete. So the query that we're going to write in here is going to be the delete. So delete from sign up where user ID, where user ID, because this user ID is what is the name of the attributes in the table sign up. It's an SQL statement, so be careful you don't mess it up. This user ID is different. Here's one I just created just to hold the get method for the delete. This is coming from the database, so be careful when you are making those selections, where user ID is equal to single quote, double quote, sorry. So double quote, full stop, then the one I've just created, which is user ID, dot single quotes, double quote, single quotes. Then we close. Now let me take my time and explain this to you. We have this. So we open with a string. The query is taking up a string. So we open here. Then when we got to user ID over here, we're supposed to pick the ID in string. So what we did was we started with a single quote here. Then we close this string. One way is we've closed this string. So this is being closed over here. We already started with a single quote here. So we've closed it. Now the concatenation means continue with what you're doing. So by putting a concatenation symbol here, then we can continue. We could have used a single quote and gone through a different process, but this makes it easier. So we continue with it. That's how come we are closing it. So the query actually should always be in quotes. So when you close it, you make sure you open it and close it properly. All right, so now once we have our query set, of course, it is necessary to have our results also declared. So we declared a variable called results that will hold the connection string together with the query. And that result is almost all the time based on my SQLi query. And of course, it takes in two arguments. The first one is the connection string. The second one is the query that we have just created. We close with a semicolon. Once we are done with this one, then we have to now find out if the query that's the result that we have is true. If it is true, then it should display, once it does the deletion, it should display for us the view page again. So we'll create an if statement and we'll push in the results variable that we have already declared. Then within it, we will start with we start putting in where the header should go, which page should open when the results that we were looking for is true, which page should it open. That is why we are using the header function. So we talk to it, give it a location where it has to go. If it is true, there is no error, it should open the view.php page again for us. So I'll end this strip, this string with a semicolon. Then I'll move on to the other option, assuming. So if the results does not come out with an error, it should still open the view for us. The view is the list of people who are members. It will open the view for us. This time round, we'll have the record that we wanted to delete gone. Else, if there is an error, then what we want the page to do is to now tell us by echoing to us that we should please check our query. SQL query. Let's just say query. Please check your query. This will give us a chance to correct it and do the right thing. When all is done and everything is looking perfect, we can still come again to this stage. So when we do repair once, this is of course closing this if set. So let's close this if set, the if statement with an else here. And within it, we have our last header. It is going to give us a location that we want to show Usually it's just the same place, so the location is going to be our view.php page. And that is what we're looking for. So, okay, so leave everything seemed right now. Now let's go back again to our page, our web browser, and see if everything is set to delete properly. So let's go back again. I'll refresh the page. I'll refresh the page. And now we have Sandra 333. I want us to delete Sandra 333 to see if it will work. Okay, we have an error. It says pass error, syntax error, if line 4. So let's go back and check if we have an error there. So we are in the VS Code. It says line 3. Usually the error messages that are given to us is line 4. So it means it could either be line 3, a line above it, or a line after it. So let's go again to the VS Code. Let's see. Yes, here. So we have required ones. I always say we end with a semicolon. So I have to end correctly with a semicolon. Let's go back again to the browser. Let's see if everything seems okay. So press the page. Bingo. So everything works perfectly now. So we have Kwame. Now let's try and delete, maybe let's add a new record. So I come here. Let's me find I think there is Joseph. So Joseph of Ghana. And his username is jghana. His email is jghana.com, and possibly his password is jghana. Let's save this record. Oh, it says please enter an email address. What I have here is not an email address. Indeed, it is not. So jghana at, let's say, gmail.com. So save. All right, so we have jghana, Joseph of Ghana, jghana, and that is working perfectly. So let's see if we can delete this one. So let's delete Emanuela and see if it will work. We click on Emanuela. Oh, Emanuela is gone. Retrieval. The spelling of retrieval is wrong. So we need to correct it. Retrieval. So let's go to our code. And that is a view. We want to have a little correction. Oh, Lord. So correct retrieval in our code on a view. Where do we have retrieval? So the retrieval here, yes. So we have it corrected. When we go back again to our page, we should see it corrected when we refresh it. All right, so I think now we've been able to create a CRUD application, and I'm believing you should be able to do this yourself. You don't need to use Bootstrap. You can use your regular CSS to come out with something similar. Now, There are some few things I would want you to do during your presentation. The topics I've given you, I expect you to create a login page where when you log in, you have access to the records, like how you see over here. I'm going to load these codes for you. The sign up page, the view page, that is the view page that we have in here, and so on and so forth. So please go through this and complete your exercises. Thank you very much. See you in class, possibly within this week.